Good afternoon, dear student. Today we are going to start Unit 4 of our syllabus. That there are miscellaneous offences under this Unit 4. So first we are going to discuss offences relating to elections and offences relating to public servant. As far as offences relating to elections are concerned, Section 171A to 171E incorporate the provision. The chapter offences relating to elections of the IPC was added in the year 1920. Soon after, the British Indian government introduced limited scope of participation for Indians in government elections. It seeks to make punishable bribery, undue influence, personation, and other malpractices at elections, and to provide punishment therefore. After independence, a much more comprehensive legislation covering the law of elections was introduced in the form of the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. This enactment contains detailed provisions regarding the nature and conduct of elections for the Parliament and state legislatures. In spite of these separate enactments, these general provisions of IPC are highly necessary insofar as they apply not only to elections to Parliament or to the legislatures of states, but to every other kind of election, such as elections to the municipalities, village panchayats, district boards, and other local authorities. It need not be stated that in a democratic state like India, where institutions based on free franchise are bound to grow, such law and rules applicable to all types of elections are highly essential. It is salutary to consider what were the reasons put forward for the introduction of the provisions relating to election offences in 1920. The Select Committee justifying incorporation of the offences in the IPC observed that we feel there are distinct advantages at the present time when election is to play so important a part in the new public life of India, that public conscience should be markedly drawn to the danger of corrupt practices in relation to the franchise, whether that franchise relates to legislative or other bodies. We feel it is of the greatest importance that the principle of the purity of the franchise should be insisted on in the general criminal law of the country, and that it should not be left to local legislature to deal with broad principles. The very first provision, section 174A in the chapter, relates to definition of candidate and electoral right. Thereafter, the chapter details 6 offences in relation to elections. They are bribery and punishment thereof. Second is undue influence. Third is personation at election, making or publishing false statements, illegal payments, and failure to keep election accounts. The first 3 offences, namely bribery, undue influence, and personation, are considered grave enough to deserve imprisonment for a term up to 1 year. The other 3 offences, that is making false statements about the personal character or conduct of candidate, illegal payments in connection with an election, and failure to keep election accounts as required by law, are punishable with fine only. The scope of the section is wide and covers elections to not just the legislative bodies like Parliament and state legislatures, but also to elections to local bodies like village panchayats, district board, municipalities, and corporations. As far as 171 is concerned, this section is a definition clause which qualifies the election related to offences described in the following sections. And for candidate means a person who has been nominated as a candidate at any election. An electoral right means the right of a person to stand or not to stand as, or to withdraw from being a candidate, or to vote or refrain from voting at any election. The term electoral rights means the right of a person to stand or not to stand for election or withdraw his candidature, or as also to vote or refrain from voting. Election means it denotes election for the purpose of selecting members of any legislative, municipal or other public authority of whatever character. Section 171B defines bribery. Bribery as the giving or acceptance of a gratification, either as a motive or as a reward, to any person to induce him to stand or not to stand as a candidate, or to withdraw from the contest, or to vote or not to vote at an election. The Supreme Court in Mohan Singh versus Bhanwala, Mohan Singh versus Bhamarlal, considered the meaning of the term gratification by referring to the explanation to 123(1)(b) of the Representative of People's Act, and observed that gratification even by the above explanation is not restricted to pecuniary gratification or gratifications estimable in money, and it includes all forms of entertainment and all forms of employment for reward, barring bona fide elections expenses. Therefore, the term gratification may be taken to mean something valuable which is calculated to satisfy a person's aim, object or desire, whether or not that thing is estimable in terms of money. Undue influence is defined under section 171C, and 171C defines the offence of undue influence at elections, while 171F provides for punishment for the same. The essential ingredient of the offence is that there should be a voluntary interference or attempted interference with the right of a person to enjoy his electoral rights, namely the right to stand for elections or to withdraw from elections. The section is much broader, however, and covers other acts of threat and intimidation also. In fact, subsections 2 cover threat to candidate or a voter or any other person in whom a candidate or voter is interested in with injury of any kind. This apart, even acts or attempts to induce fear of divine displeasure or a spiritual censure have been covered by the section. The gist of the offence of undue influence consists in voluntary interference or attempts at interference with the free exercise of any electoral rights. And personation at an election is defined under 171D, and 171 is the punishment for undue influence or personation at an election. The offence defined here differs from the previous ones in that it covers the offences committed not by the candidate or his agent but by others also. The essence of the offence of false personation is that the offender pretends to be other than what he really is. It covers only issues when there is an attempt at impersonation, and it does not come into play when the candidate or his agent do not claim to be the voters themselves. When they make a cross against any name, the offender must have a corrupt motive. A person in good faith believes that he has 2 votes as his name appeared in 2 lists of voters at 2 polling stations, therefore cannot be held guilty under this section. 171G penalizes a person making or publishing a false statement in relation to a personal character or conduct of a candidate. A statement that does not contain a statement of fact relating to the personal character or conduct of a candidate does not amount to an offence under the section, and the punishment is given An election speech containing mere general expression also does not warrant. Section 171I talks about failure to keep an election account. whoever being required by any law for the time being in force or any rule having the force of law to keep account of expenses incurred at or in connection with an election fails to keep such account shall be punished with fine which may extend to 500 rupees. Now another major offence that are relevant here is section 172 to 190, that is contempt of the lawful authority of public servant. Chapter 10 of the Indian Penal Code containing 19 sections cover the subject of penal consequences of all disobedience of the lawful authority of public servants. Actually, this chapter should be seen as the converse of chapter 9 of the IPC, which deals with the offences by or relating to public servants. As the lawmakers originally conceived it, this chapter provides for the penal actions liable to be taken against members of the public for disobedience to the lawful orders of all the three main classes of public servants: courts of justice or officers of revenue or of the police. While the chapter contains a variety of acts that constitute contempts of the lawful authority of public servants, there are two core principles which have been described as essential to constitute the attempt. In order that the contempt powers be used against persons disobeying the authority of public servants, it is necessary to show that the order disobeyed is legal and the disobedience was intentional. While additional conditions have been prescribed in the different provisions, proving these two conditions are held absolutely essential. Offences relating to contempt of the lawful authority of public servants can be categorized into following. First, offences relating to avoidance or prevention of summons, notice, orders, that is from section 172 to 174. Another category is offences relating to production of document or furnishing information. Third category talks about offences relating to statement on oaths. Fourth is about false information causing wrongful use of power by public servants causing injury. Fifth category is about offences relating to sale of property effected through legal process. And sixth is offences relating to disobeying or non-enforcing order of public servant. That is from 187 to 190. An important aspect of the offences provided in this chapter needs to be highlighted. Most of the sections contain two portions. The first portion describes the main offence and the second clause covers aggravated forms of the offence and provide for more stringent punishment. Since more or less the offences are arranged subject-wise in a chronological manner, we shall study each section individually. Section 172 makes punishable the willful avoidance of receiving summons, notice or order issued by a person legally competent to issue it. The avoidance may be by abscondence or other means. The following are the main ingredient of the offence that need to be proved. First, that the summons, notice or order has been issued. That summon, notice or order has been issued by a public servant and the public servant was legally competent to issue it. The summon, notice or order has been issued to be served on the accused. In other words, the accused must be shown to have known or have reason to believe that it had been issued. That the accused has absconded to avoid it being served. The second clause, which deals with the aggravated form of the offence, requires two further conditions to be established. That the process required the attendance of the accused personally or by his agent, or required the production of a document or an electronic record by him. Such attendance or production must be for the purpose of appearing in a court of justice. It is interesting to note that this section contemplates only evasion of a service of summons, notice or order. Therefore, a person who absconds in apprehension that process will be issued against him does not come within the purview of section 172. It also does not cover evasion of a warrant of arrest, as it is not an order served an accused, but merely an order to the police to arrest him. Further, only evasion of the summons is made an offence, and not non-appearance in response to receipt of summons or notice. Section 173 talks about even a bare talks about preventing service of summons or other proceedings, or preventing publication thereof. Even a bare reading of 173 make it clear that the accused is liable only when it is shown that he actively resisted and had the intention to prevent serving of summons. Three essential prerequisites need to be established are the intention, prevention, and lawful authority of public servant. Prevention may be a direct act or by evasion or concealment. It needs to be noted that what the section contemplates is intentional prevention of serving summons or affixing to any place the summons, or intentional removal of summons, or intentional prevention of making proclamation as provided for in law. The aggravated form of the offence covers the event when the intentional prevention of serving summons is in relation to a summons to attend a court of justice, in which the punishment is for 6 months. Section 174 talks about non-attendance in obedience to an order from public servant. For this section to be operational, the summon or order must be legally valid, issued by a person competent to do so, and most importantly, must fulfill all the requirements of law. Thus, the summons or order should clearly indicate the person addressed and give full and complete details of the place, time, and date when he is required to present himself before the named authority or court. Thus, the presence of the accused must be compulsory and not merely optional. Finally, the absence of the accused to present himself must be intentional. Section 175 make provision when omission to produce document to public servant by person legally bound to produce it. So, scope of section 175 is that to punish a person under this section, it must be established that the accused was legally bound to produce or deliver the document or electronic record he was required to produce or deliver. However, it should be noted that every citizen enjoys constitutional protection against self-incrimination, and therefore no person undergoing a trial can be convicted for refusal to produce a document or evidence which would implicate himself, although this section may make such refusal punishable. Article 20, Clause 3 of the Constitution, guaranteeing the right against testimonial compulsion, is not only confined to the oral evidence of the person facing a criminal trial, but also extended to the compulsory production of documents that are likely to be used as evidence against him. An accused therefore cannot be compelled to produce any document that contravenes Article 23 of the Constitution. As far as section 177 is concerned, it can be seen that whereas the previous section 176 punishes omission to give information, the present section 177 makes punishable deliberately giving false information with the knowledge that it is false. The essential ingredient therefore are as follows. First, accused must be legally bound to furnish the information. Information must be furnished to a public servant. In pursuance of such requirement, accused did furnish certain information. Information so furnished was actually false. Accused must have furnished the information knowing well that it was actually false or had reason to believe that it was false. And sixth is, with regard to the operation of clause 2, aggravated form of the offence, the information must have been in connection with the commission of an offence. Section 178 and 179 talk about offences relating to statements on oath. While Section 178 make it an offence to take an oath or make an affirmation, Section 179 makes it an offence to refuse to answer the public servant, or actually refers to a refusal to give evidence. Therefore, a person may bind himself by an oath to state the truth, but may even after that refuse to state the truth or speak at all, which is the subject matter of the present section. However, there are certain exemptions in law which curtail the scope of the section. Therefore, the accused person's liability to state the truth is qualified by provisions of Section 121 to 132 of the Indian Evidence Act. Section 180 talks about refusing to sign a statement. The section was enacted at a time when all witnesses were required to sign the statements recorded by the police officer. However, under Section 162 of CRPC, witnesses are not required to sign the statement made by them. However, where a complaint is made in writing about an offence and which is received under Section 154 CRPC, then the complaint should bear the signature of the first informant or the complainant. Therefore, in absence of any statutory obligation, an accused who refuses to sign a statement commits no offence under Section 180. It says that whoever refuses to sign any statement made by him when required to sign that statement by a public servant legally competent to require that he shall sign that statement shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 months, or with fine, or with both. Section 181 talks about false statement on oath or affirmation of public servant or person authorized to administer an oath or affirmation. It is interesting to note that provision 181 are almost identical to that 191 of the code. 181 says that whoever being legally bound, 181 punishes making a false statement on oath or affirmation to a public servant. To rope an accused in Section 181, the prosecution needs to prove that the accused took the oath or made the affirmation, was legally bound to do so, and they state the truth to a public servant, and made a statement which was false, or he knew or had reason to believe that the statement was false, or he did not believe that the statement was true. However, 181 is inapplicable when the public servant administers the oath in a case wholly beyond his jurisdiction. Section 182 talks about false information causing wrongful use of power by public servant or causing injury. This section relates to giving information which the informer know or believe to be false to a public servant with intent to make him to use his lawful power to cause injury or annoyance to other person. Its object is to ensure that a public servant should not be given false or misleading information, and thereby to make him to do what he ought not to do, or to omit what he ought to do. The essential ingredient of the offence can be described as giving of false information to a public servant, which information is known by the informant to be false, given with intention to influence the public servant to act otherwise than he would have acted, and which may have the effect of causing injury or annoyance to any person. Section 183 talks about the punishment, the offering of resistance to the seizure of property by the lawful authority. So the essential ingredient to prove the offence under 183 is accused must have offered resistance to the taking of any property. The property was being seized under the authority of a public servant. Such authority must be shown to be lawful. And fourth is, at the time when the accused resisted the seizure, he must be shown to have known or had reason to believe that public servant had the authority to the taking of the property. Section 194 talks about obstructing sale of property offered for sale by authority of public servant, And 185 talks about illegal purchase or bid for property offered for sale by authority or public servant. And 186 talks about obstructing public servant in discharge of public function. Section 186 makes a general provision for the obstruction of public servant in the discharge of their public functions. In case of judicial officers, any obstructions will amount to a contempt of court and is as such summarily punishable under 345 of CRPC, and the offences may be of any of the offences under section 175, 178, 179, 180 or 228 of the IPC. What is to be noted is that the obstruction must be caused during the discharge of public functions and not in other times. Section 187 talks about omission to assist public servant when bound by law to give assistance. 187 provides for punishment for intentional omission on part of a person who is bound by law to render assistance to a public servant in the execution of his public duty and executing any process lawfully issued by a court of justice. Third, preventing the commission of an offence. And fourth is suppressing a riot or affray or apprehending a person who has charged or guilty of an offence or who has escaped from custody. Section 188 prescribes the punishment for disobedience of the lawful orders of a public servant, especially when the disobedience results in any of the consequences outlined in the second and third clauses of the section to the person lawfully employed. Section 189 talks about threat of injury to public servant, and section 190 talks about threat of injury to induce person to refrain from applying for protection to public servant. So section 189 and 190 punish criminal threats affecting public servants. The former is involved when threat is directed against public servant himself, while the latter is aimed the person who seeks this protection. So these have been the offences relating to elections and offences by or relating to public servants. I hope this lecture will be helpful to understand these offences. Thank you very much.